Rahinnane Castle is visually stunning. It is a castle inside a large rath, a variation on a motte and bailey castle. It's also historically interesting, since in the Elizabethan period it was the seat of the Knight of Kerry. Nevertheless, little is known about it, apart from the fact it was destroyed in both the 9 Years' War and in the Cromwellian period. Indeed, it does not even appear in some of the classic works on Irish castles, such as Leake's famous book. While the loss of historical records is no surprise, given Ireland's turbulent history, the fact that the ruined castle is absent from most works on Irish castles is a surprise, as it is extremely picturesque and in a very beautiful part of Ireland. Like many tower houses, it was probably built in the 15th or 16th centuries. This was a period of great castle building in many parts of Ireland. Hundreds of tower houses were built at this time. These small castles were fortified residences in which a lord usually resided. Many were surrounded by a bawn, in other words a walled enclosure derived from the Irish word bodún, which according to O'Keeffe may come from ba, the plural of cow, bow in Irish, and dún, in other words cowfort, as the Gaelic Irish would often leave their cattle in the bawns overnight. In addition to the tower, many tower houses, especially those of the wealthier lords, also had a hall. This could either be included in the main building, as in the case of Ballycarbery in Kerry, or be a separate building. While tower houses are seen as defensive buildings, which they were, they also had important symbolic roles. They were sites of power in which the lords demonstrated their status and strength, performed many of the tasks and roles associated with lordship, such as administering territory, dealing with followers, clients, tenants, receiving rents, and demonstrating their wealth and power through important feasts. Much of this took place in hall, in front of some sort of public. The hall was thus a very important part of the castle. Unfortunately, when they were separate buildings, their survival rate has been very low, often because they were built of less durable materials such as wood. Tower houses were generally tall, between 3 and 5 stories high. Most would have battlements on top, something taken from the more classical model of the castle. Similarly, they would have narrow slit windows and machicolations. The latter is an opening on the wall of a castle, often consisting of a protruding structure which could be used to drop stones or other materials on attackers. Also present would have been the politely named guardrobe or toilet, in which human waste was let fall outside the castle through another hole in the wall. Many castles also had the infamous murder hole. This was usually an internal feature in a space between the outer door and an internal one. Most tower houses were built in a period between 1450 and 1620. Huge numbers of them were built in Ireland, perhaps as many as 3,500. While some have been restored or have miraculously survived onto the present, many have been lost, and most tower houses are in some form of ruin at the present. In Kerry, many of the castles were ruined in the Elizabethan era, either in the Desmond Rebellions or the 9 Years' War. Some of these may have been repaired afterwards. However, the end of the Cromwellian Wars saw the deliberate destruction of many castles, including Rahanan. Let us now look at the castle itself. The tower house has 3 stories, or rather had, since as can be seen it is badly damaged. Originally, it seems to have been L-shaped. The main tower is roughly 14 metres by 9 metres. The west wall still stands to its original height, as does most of the north and south walls. However, the east wall is completely gone, as well as the roof and internal ceilings. At the east end of the north wall were projecting turrets, while on the east wall, the remains of 2 corner turrets can be seen. The south wall was longer than the north, creating the L shape. In addition, the castle entrance was here, with the main stairs being near this. Part of these stairs still exist. The interior of the castle is largely destroyed, though it is still possible to identify traces of the different floors and rooms. The ground floor appears to have been divided into 2 chambers, one of which may possibly have served as some sort of dungeon. The first floor was vaulted, and may well have served as a hall, as mentioned above. It had a wooden floor and was roofed by what is called a pointed barrel vault. Little can be said about the second floor, but it seems to have been strengthened internally. In addition to the Tower House, other buildings existed within the enclosure. These may have been built later than the castle. Immediately to the south of the Tower House are the foundations of a large building. This is rectangular and measures around 22 metres west-southwest by east-northeast, by 12 metres north-northwest by south-southeast. Immediately to the west of the castle are traces of another possible building. Rahanan was occupied over various periods and was badly damaged, if not destroyed, at least twice. Even after its final destruction, the Knight of Kerry and his family seem to have still lived here. Perhaps they lived in one of the buildings outside the castle. As far as I know, Rahanan has never been excavated, which is a pity. Undoubtedly, this would reveal much to us about its history, whether in the 16th and 17th century, which we have some information about, as well as previous periods, such as when the Knights of Kerry first occupied it, or when it was used as a rath centuries before. One of the most interesting things about Rahanan is that it is located within a rath, and quite a large one at that. It is a bivalent rath, in other words, it had two ditches. Internally, it measures 44 metres north-south and 37 metres east-west, so it is quite a substantial place. It obviously had been of importance, as it was positioned to control Mam na Grithe, or Pass of the Wind. This ran through the low ridge that separates the low-lying land surrounding Ventry and Smeric harbours. The rath is surrounded by two ditches with a deep trench between them. The outer ditch varies between 0.6 metres and 2.5 metres above the external ground level, and between 2 metres and 5 metres above the trench. In turn, the trench is between 2.5 metres and 5.7 metres in width. Anyone at the bottom of the trench wanting to climb the inner ditch would have to scale up to 8 metres. But the climb down into the internal area would have been much less, just a little over 2 metres. The outer ditch is used as a field boundary, so it probably has been altered somewhat. There are two entrances to the rath, both of which may have been original. One is in the northwest and the other in the east. In the northwest, there is a 2-metre wide causeway across the trench, a sort of bridge. The eastern entrance faces downhill and is one now used for entrance to the site. Also within the trench is the entrance to a souterrain, or rather was, as it has been covered over. This was 1.4 metres high by 1.5 metres wide, although the souterrain narrowed rapidly and ran downhill onto the inner ditch. A brave soul entered it in 1845, reporting that it ran far underground and branched in various directions. However, it seems that it was shortly afterwards destroyed. To finish this video, I want to discuss the Knights of Kerry a little. They were a minor branch of the Geraldines. According to Paul MacCotter, who's done extensive research on them, quote, "The Geraldines as a family and later a lineage stand apart in their valour, native acquisitiveness, thirst for domination, and success in multiplication." End quote. He also says that there were at least 117 branches of Geraldine using the surname Fitzgerald in Ireland, with dozens more of obscure ancestry. As might be guessed from this, the early history of the Knights of Kerry is complex, as, like all lordly families in Ireland, it is not always possible to identify the real descent from a mass of names and, at times, contradictory traditions. Although there may now be official lines of descent for these families, many of these were actually established hundreds of years later and are complicated from a historical point of view. For those interested in this subject, I would strongly recommend reading Paul MacCotter's works on the early Knights of Kerry and other minor Geraldines. From the mid-14th century, the Knights of Kerry held possession of a large part of the Dingle Peninsula, including at times Dingle, where they built a castle, though the Earl of Desmond also claimed the town. They also had land in Cork and other parts of Kerry, probably even holding Ballymala's castle near Killorglin for a while. However, such was the dynamic nature of lordship in Ireland that the lands they held, or claimed, changed a lot. Furthermore, most of their land was in a very peripheral area. This may actually have helped them, notably in an avoidance of conflict with both the Earl of Desmond and the English government. However, Under Elizabeth, things changed dramatically, as the English state extended its power, destroying the autonomous lordships, both those that were Gaelic and Old English, such as the Knight of Kerry. Although the Old English saw themselves as English, because they remained Catholic, their claim to be English was rejected. The downfall and death of the Earl of Desmond left a vacuum in Munster, which was exacerbated by the plantation. As a result, when the 9 Years' War broke out, unlike most of Ireland, a large number of Old English lords in Munster were sympathetic to Hugh O'Neill's Confederacy. These included some butlers, such as Lords Mountgarrett and Kerr, minor lords such as Piers Lacey, and various Geraldines, including James Fitzthomas, nephew of the last Earl of Desmond and made Earl of Desmond by Hugh O'Neill, Lord Leishnaw, and occasionally the Knight of Kerry. Like many lords during the 9 Years' War, William Fitzgerald, then Knight of Kerry, wavered between supporting the government and supporting Hugh O'Neill. Initially, he seems to have been opposed to O'Neill and his Catholic Confederacy, but in 1601, during the Kinsale campaign, he had come over to Hugh O'Neill's side. In the aftermath of English victory at Kinsale, Charles Wilmot was sent to Kerry to defeat the Confederate lords there, including the Knight of Kerry. Wilmot attacked the knight at Ballyhow Castle near Camp. There followed a ferocious but inconclusive battle. However, after it, Wilmot captured both Castle Gregory and Rahanan. Both of these were deliberately damaged by the English forces. However, after the war, the Knight of Kerry would return there, repairing the castle. When the 9 Years' War ended, the Knight of Kerry was pardoned and, like many others, had to adapt to a rapidly changing Ireland. A new state began to be built, one that was much more colonial, with Catholics being largely excluded from power and often persecuted. The Knights of Kerry seem to have survived this period. However, in the 1640s, the Catholic Irish rebelled, with the Gaelic Irish trying to regain what they had lost and the Old English joining them. They were defeated and brutally treated. However, although he was Catholic, the then Knight of Kerry, John Fitzgerald, refused to join the Confederacy, and he may even have supported the Cromwellian forces. His house, probably Rahinnane Castle at that stage, was burned and his lands confiscated by the Confederacy and granted to others. In the final year of the war, Cromwellian troops destroyed most of the castles in Kerry. Probably Rahanan suffered again. Making matters worse, despite his loyalty, his lands were confiscated by Cromwell's government. However, he eventually got them back. In 1690, there was another war and another defeat. While the Knight of Kerry fought for James, he did not flee to the continent afterwards. Choosing to remain in Ireland in a period of persecution and facing loss of his lands, the knight chose a route of Anglicisation, becoming a landlord and eventually moving to Valencia. Rahinnane Castle was left a ruin. 'Tis an elegant one, offering a glimpse of a lost world, or indeed lost worlds. It's also well situated, as from its ruins the tip of Iveragh Peninsula and Valentia Island can be seen. A castle with a view, a fragment of the puzzle of Irish history.